This is Unfiltered Therapist, and we're about to break barriers, embrace growth, and invite you to join in this journey of true, authentic self-discovery. Let's do this. Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
So, for people who are actually going to watch the recording, I'm holding a mouse mic to my mouth. And I apologize because I really thought this would make the audio better, and I think it will, but it means I have to hold a tiny baby mic to my face. So that's weird, but it's fine. Don't judge me. I feel like it is what it is. This topic is like probably the first topic we talked about having on the podcast, and it's funny that it took so long for us to just like make it happen. But more than anything, I think it's because Kelly is finishing her master's degree this week. Like,
Yeah, this week.
so soon. So obviously girlfriend's been like trying to balance being a grad student, working full time, doing her internship with us. She is the mom to a beautiful 2-year-old little girl, a wife, trying to manage a house, like just a few little things, nothing serious.
Just little things.
We're just happy that we could make the time now. But I am so freaking excited because you are always the best about like having these types of conversations. You show up on Instagram a lot. If people aren't following you, I highly recommend that they do because you're really good about just like being transparent about what the heck's going on in your life. So
Thanks.
I guess, is there anything else that I haven't already touched on that you would like people to know about you before we get started?
Oh, no, I don't think so. You pretty much covered all of the main points of like what's going on for me in my life, where I'm at, how busy I am, all the
Yes.
things.
Okay. I feel like people are going to learn so much more about you in this conversation too. So to like stop being so ominous, I guess like realistically, you and I had a conversation very generally about, I don't know, 3 months ago about just like how hard adult friendship is. And
Yes.
I mean, our conversation started mostly about our own lives, but then also about like the way that we see clients and talk about this topic and like how universal it is, yet we do not talk about it. And
No.
I kind of don't want to just like surface talk about this shit today. I'm like, let's talk about this in a way that's like really honest. And I have no problem doing that because I think that it's important for people to know that they are not the only ones suffering in this department.
Yeah, I
And all of the
agree.
reasons why.
I
Ugh.
agree. It's adult friendships are like, yeah, kind of like you said, it's such a topic I feel like that like obviously affects us personally as like humans, but then also like for clients I see it a lot and how it affects like clients and what's going on for them. And so I just like the more that I was thinking about it and after kind of like recently going through like a friendship breakup, I guess, of my
Mm,
own, I was like, wow, this is like a really shitty feeling. And
the
I just
worst.
feel like it's not really talked about. Like other people will be like, "Oh, that sucks that like you and so aren't friends." And then that you're just like, "Yeah, then that's kind of it, right?" Like you don't want to obviously like talk bad about the person or anything, but it's just like then that's it. It's just like, "Okay, move on. Like you have other friends, it doesn't matter." But
Mhm.
it's like wow, like reflecting on at least for me, like the friendship that I lost, like how that really impacted me and it was like really hard. And I feel like people just didn't really maybe understand that or maybe they did but they just like didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I so appreciate you saying that and sharing that because friendship breakups are one of the things I like really wanted to spend time on today. I actually was in a session last week and talking about friendship breakups and like something clicked where I kind of had this like epiphany in the way that we handle different relationships in our life. And when you're in like a romantic relationship or you're dating, there's like always this like underlying, we're trying to see if we're the right fit for each other, but we also know if we're not, we'll like break up or like even divorce or things like that. And not that we like hope for that, but it's like always an
Yes.
understanding that the relationship is either working or it's over. Whereas
Hmm.
like in friendships, it's really rare that we enter a friendship and go like either this is going to work or it's over. It's like we meet people, we feel deeply connected to them, and then we're like we're going to be friends forever.
Yeah.
So there's like no preparation for what it would feel like for that to end. Um
Exactly.
and we don't talk about how like we don't talk about the grieving process of a friendship. We talk about like, oh, you just went through a breakup. That's so hard. Like, are you taking some time? Who are you talking to? Are you like having a girls' night? Like, what are you doing?
Right.
Whereas we don't talk about that with friends at all.
No, exactly, exactly. And I think that's why when you and I originally talked about doing a podcast, like right away I was like, oh, I wanted to talk about friendships because yeah, I just think it affects like everybody so much. And I think a big thing for me is that I also kind of feel like everybody has struggled with this. Like no matter
Yes.
who you are, what your profession is, like how great of a friend you are, right? Like it everybody has gone through like the heartache of losing a friend or even being like blindsided by a friendship ending, like if you're not the person ending it. And I feel like at also no matter how old you are, it could
Mm.
happen to like our parents or our grandparents, right? Like it's not just like something that's like isolated to being like a teenager or like 20, right? It happens like throughout your whole lifespan.
In your experience, in your own life or the people that are around you, like what are things that you've seen that have led inevitably to like a friendship breakup?
Oh, yeah. You know what? Something I was like actually thinking about this, something that I think plays into some friendship breakups is it could also be your attachment style,
Yes.
and how that shows up in a friendship, which for me is not something like I never really associated that with like friendships necessarily. And then when something recent happened to me and I was like I feel like my reaction was like I was very like anxious about it and I was like I don't understand what's happening like but when I reflected back I was like oh I think like I was acting in like kind of an anxious attachment style in this friendship.
Mm.
And so yeah, it was I don't know. And so I think like that could happen. Also, if you maybe don't set like boundaries in the friendship,
Oh
like,
God, yeah.
so there could be like, you're always like giving. So you could be on that side of the friendship where you're always like giving into the relationship. And then it kind of gets to a point where maybe you feel like you aren't receiving anything and you're always the person that has to like be there for the other person. And that can also be really draining. And I think that that can also lead to like friendships ending. Um, I think boundaries are a big one. And yeah, like your attachment style and how that shows up. What about for you? Have you felt like what do you think contributes to like friendships ending?
Yeah, you know what? I actually love that you just like affiliated attachment styles because I've never had language for it, but I actually think that's like very accurate. Where something that I think is so interesting is in like my marriage, I can so wholeheartedly say I have like a secure attachment to my husband. But in
Yeah.
friendship, I am so anxiously attached to my friends. And
Yeah.
in a way where I would actually say I'm like a combo of like an anxious avoidant where I always assume that someone's mad at me. Like I always believe that like I'm letting someone down or I'm not attentive
Yeah.
enough. I'm not answering my text messages fast enough. People think I don't care about them. So then one of two things happens. Either I go through like a tailspin of like I need to like mass text everyone and remind everyone I love them and like I didn't forget about them and I hope it's enough. It's never like I am doing this just because I love them and it's true, but in my like attachment style, I'm like I want to make sure it's enough that they're not actually mad.
Yeah.
Or I feel like I've already crossed the line of being a bad friend, so now I'm actually going to ghost people in like a weird silent way and like avoid having to face that like I maybe nothing's wrong, but I think that things are wrong and things end. And I actually think that a lot of people that I've had friendship breakups with are the same. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so we just end up always feeling like it's never enough. We're not doing enough. We're not showing up enough. We're not supporting the right way. So then maybe we're just not in each other's lives the same way and like it kind of fades out. That's like one type of breakup where it's like, I guess, again, the difference between a romantic breakup where you can't just be like,
Yeah.
I'm not answering you anymore. But like,
Right?
then there's the breakups that are like, there's like a conflict, a disagreement, and like it's now
Yes.
cold turkey over. And I feel like that's a
Yeah.
totally different experience.
I totally agree. I feel like, and I mean, for me, like I haven't had personally, like, I've had some friendships that have ended, like, I think maybe one friendship like that, like, years ago where it was like, "Oh, you did this," like, or whatever, like, yeah, kinda like you said, there was, like, a conflict. We couldn't get on the same page about, like, the situation, and so it was like, "Okay, like, friendship's over." We obviously don't agree on the same things and have, like, different values, and so
Yeah.
but I don't know, and I wonder, like, what your thoughts are on that. Like, do you think it's almost, like, easier to walk away from a friendship if there is, like, a conflict as opposed to, like, walking away from a friendship if it's just like maybe something happened that was like a miscommunication
Mm,
or you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
nothing big happened. The friendship just kind of like fizzled. What do you think? Do you think like conflict helps?
Oh, that's such a good question. And actually, like, something I was thinking about too in this realm, and I actually wonder if this will answer this question, is from like a personal, like, coping perspective, what is the difference between ending a romantic relationship and a friendship for ourselves? And one of the things that I was thinking about is in some ways, losing a friend feels more personal because in relationships, like in romantic relationships, you can love someone and like appreciate them as a person, but be like, we're just not the right fit for each other because maybe one of us wants kids and one of us doesn't. Maybe we manage finances differently. Maybe we want to live in different places. Like, so it's
Yeah.
like you can have like admiration and love for someone and have it end, or it like wasn't the right fit and things go sideways and whatever. But like when you lose a friendship, it feels strangely more personal because what it feels
It
like
does.
is you don't like me as a person. You don't want to spend time with me as a person. I'm not worth even like the small pockets of good that we can have. And I think in some ways when we think about friendships that end in like a conflict, like a really fast conflict, you can like admonish your own shame or guilt by blaming the conflict or like the way the person showed up in the conflict. So
Yeah.
maybe early on, it feels more comfortable because you can be like, yeah, fuck them for what they said or did or whatever. And like not think about how that landed personally. But I think in the long run, it's harder to like make peace with. Whereas when things kind of like fizzle out, it might be like sad or distant, but like I feel like there's almost like an underlying understanding that as a person, you and that person are no longer like on the same page, but like
Yeah.
there's no ill will necessarily. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. That I kind of feel the same. I totally agree. I feel like if it's so hard. Like it's so hard to manage. I think either way, right? Like if it is a conflict, yeah, you might be able to say like, "Oh, they did this and that." So then you like feel better about it, but it's still like you're losing that person in your life. And I think with like friendships, it's hard because you create so many great memories and like they're such a big part of your life, right? Like I think in relationships, obviously it's the same, like that's someone that you love. But I think when friendships end, it's also still someone that you loved. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of times people are just like, oh my gosh, well, like she sucked anyway, or whatever, like get over it, like that kind of mentality. And maybe people are just saying that because they want to make you feel better. But
Totally.
it's also like, but that was someone that I like spent a lot of time with and I loved and like I shared a lot of memories and
Mm,
they were like your person and so it's so hard when that ends and also I feel like if it ends and you don't really have a say if that makes
mhm,
sense like and so for me like when I'm thinking about this friendship breakup that I had I think a part of why I was really hurt by the situation is because a lot of it stemmed from misunderstanding.
mm,
Also, I realize now that I was anxious in my response, which I think then, in turn, the person was like, okay, yeah, bye. But I think what really hurt is like this one misunderstanding happened. Nothing big, nothing serious, like not like, but then to just like walk away, I feel like a part of me kind of felt like abandoned. And then like
mm.
you just don't want to be my friend like ever again. It's
Yes.
like, it's so hard to accept that where I felt like I was the problem. Like, I think for a lot of months after, I was like, oh my God, like, am I a bad friend? Like, what, like, of course, you reflect back, like, what could you have done differently? And of course, for any conflict, whether it's in a relationship, like romantic or a friendship, you question, like, what your role is and what you could have done differently. But I think also it's so hard, just like a romantic breakup, like if you don't have a say and the person's just like, yeah, I'm done with you. A
Mm,
lot of it is like trying to figure out like, well, yeah, like I feel like I felt a lot of like shame personally, like there must be something wrong with me, like I'm not a
Yeah.
good friend. I couldn't sleep. Like I literally was like losing sleep over it, being like, I don't understand like what I did wrong exactly, right? But then this person's just
Yes.
like, no, bye. So it's
Yes.
hard. You're like abandoned kind of.
Totally. And I actually think like if anyone takes advice about this, like it's okay that relationships end, whether they're friendships or romantic
Yeah.
relationships. But we all know how shitty it is to be in a relationship with someone where it's just like, we're done now. Bye. And you're like left with so many questions about like what went wrong. And even if it
Yeah.
sucks to hear, at least if you have an answer, you know what it's like. You can at least build self awareness or grow from it or like understand it. It's not necessarily about getting defensive as much as it's like, I just need to understand. And like, we are all very conflict avoidant. A lot of people are conflict avoidant.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
so we don't want to have the hard conversations, but like telling someone why you're not going to be friends anymore is actually doing them a giant service of like, this is just something that you can take or leave, but it gives clarity, it gives closure, like just having
Yeah.
things be over. The problem is when we're left without answers, we all jump to like the worst case scenario.
Yeah, you catastrophize the situation. You're like, "Oh no, like they must think this and this." You fill in the gaps, right? Because you're just like, "I
Totally.
don't understand."
Yeah, you're like, okay, so I'm a piece of shit. That's what it's, you actually hate hanging out with me. I'm the
Literally.
worst. But it might be like, oh, I just like find it really hard that like you are like more driven by your career than family. And I'm currently finding I'm getting way more fulfillment out of people that are affiliated with family and not career. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, like that sucks to hear, but like I'm not
Yeah.
gonna argue that. Like, or it really pisses me off the way that you talk about my husband or the way that you judge other people or whatever. And maybe that sucks to hear, but maybe it's something that you can work on. So it's like better to
Yeah.
say the hard thing than like leave someone in the dust and not explain why.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I feel like, and I was actually having this conversation with another coworker the other day. Like, we were talking about that. Like, she was in a place where she might have to have some conversations with, friends in her life, just around, like, yeah, I think they're just at different spots. And kind of like her approach, I was like, wow, that's so you're going to tell your friend like that you kind of essentially want to end the friendship. And like, these are the reasons why. Like, wow. But she's like, yeah, like this friendship isn't serving me anymore. And I feel like the person deserves to know that. And I was like, okay, that is like amazing because,
Yeah.
then that person has like some explanation. And I think like that would be my one kind of, I don't know, like takeaway is like if you are in, whether it's like romantic relationships or friendships where you feel like it's not serving you or you guys have different beliefs or at different stages in your life or whatever your reasoning is, to just be transparent with the other people around you so that they don't feel
Mhm.
abandoned and left like questioning, like, was it me? When really it might have not even been that person, right? Like you said, it could have just been like the situation or where they were at. And so I think being transparent, like we encourage people to do in like romantic relationships, like
Yeah.
be honest with your partner, like tell them how you feel, like that those, I think, same things should be consistent in friendships as well.
Oh, 100%. Imagine if we just like learned how to communicate in friendships the same way we learn to communicate in relationships. Like it's
Right?
identical. It is just as vulnerable. It is
Yeah.
just as personal. There's just as much love. There's just as much of a commitment. Like it's not any
Yeah.
different. And we expect that friendship breakups look like the most shitty relationship breakup you could possibly imagine. And we're supposed to just be cool with it. And it's just
Yeah.
not real. Like it's so much worse than that. I have
Yeah.
another kind of scenario that I'm curious about your take
Ooh,
on because I feel like I see this
okay.
pattern a lot
Okay.
where okay, so let's imagine like you have a friend from one side of your life and a friend from another side of your life and
Mm.
you introduce them and the three of you are like hanging out a lot and it's like so amazing to see your friends hanging out and then they start to develop a closer friendship than you ever had with either one of them and you start to feel
Ah,
left out of that dynamic.
oh, that's so hard.
Worst, right?
That is the worst.
The worst feeling in the entire world.
That is so
Ah,
hard.
oh my gosh, does I don't think that I've ever met a single person that doesn't have some level of an example of this.
Yeah.
Um, and again, I think that it is such a deep wounding of like abandonment or unworthiness
Yes.
And sometimes I think it's not warranted. I think that sometimes we do a really poor job of expressing how a relationship that we see other people developing is impacting us. And we
Yeah.
again are catastrophizing what it means.
Yeah.
And so our automatic is to jump to like, so you don't need me. You guys like each other more than me. I introduced you and now I've lost both my friends. Like, that's cool. It's over. But like,
Yeah, literally.
maybe they also just like each other and they like you and they like all of you together. And it says nothing about you as a person that those two people are developing a relationship.
Right.
So, in your opinion, what would you do in a situation being emotionally removed from it, thinking like a therapist for a second? Like, how would you handle being in that sort of scenario?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. Like it is hard, like you said, to see maybe if two people are developing what seems like a
Yeah.
stronger connection maybe than you have with one of those people. But I think for me, if I was like, yeah, if the emotions were kind of removed from it in some sense, I mean, I would just hope that the people, like my friends that I introduce, aren't leaving me out. And I think
Mm,
that would be like my biggest thing as a therapist or as a person, even just like
yeah.
that I feel included still in the friendship. Like, because, like you said, that's amazing that the two friends connect. And of course, they can be friends and have a great relationship and maybe even get along better than you get along with one of them. But
Sure.
I think just, I don't know, maybe having some I don't maybe it is like a security thing, I don't know,
Yeah.
just to know that they still value, like, my friendship in some way. I think to some degree, I would want to have that validation. Otherwise,
Hmm.
I would be like, "Well, what is this friendship, like, serving? Is this friendship serving me?" Well, like, if I'm
Oh,
always
yeah.
being left out and feeling upset, then yeah, but I agree, like, definitely, I think it would be great if they developed a great friendship and I could support that, but I would want, yeah, maybe some validation or some connectedness that they're still, wanting to be friends with me or include me or yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? How
100%.
do you think you would react in that situation?
Yeah. And I've been in this situation. I've been in this situation a few times in my life, and I think I've reacted in some ways similar and in some ways different, and yet to have nailed it. I'm not going to lie. I have not figured out the secret sauce of this
Right?
one. Um, but I think when I reflect on it outside of being like deeply in it, um, one thing I deny people the right of is hearing the way that it's impacting me. And if instead of making assumptions or like trying to like passive aggressively say how I feel, I think that I owe people the right to be like, I see that you and so are getting really close. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's a problem for me, but I am noticing that I'm having feelings of being inadequate, or I'm
Yeah.
noticing that I'm having feelings of being left out and not saying anything else. Like
Yeah.
just sharing how we feel and not saying how people have to handle that, or if it's like I need to be invited to everything or you guys can't be friends, just leaving it. And just like
Yeah.
trusting that before you introduce those people, these are two people that you had a relationship with. And so trust in that relationship enough to at least give them the right to hear how their actions are impacting you. And maybe you're going to hear something that is like the most reassuring thing in the entire world where you're like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
out to lunch, but like you're going to work through it. Or maybe you're going to have a really important conversation. But even if things don't end up working out in your favor, you owe it to yourself to honor sharing the way that that experience is coming up for you. And
Definitely.
I think in most of these cases, I've never shared transparently what that experience felt like. And so then this leads to a whole other thing where, on the podcast, I had the Desire on Fire coaches here, and like people know that that's a program I've been working through. And
Yeah.
they have a lot of like core rules in being part of that group. And one of them is an understanding that we create our own belonging. And at
Oh,
first, when I heard this, I was like, no. But I like had to think
no.
about it for a second. And basically, it was like if you walk into a room of people and you assume that you don't belong, you're going to feel so out of it. You're going to feel so left out. You're not going to try and
Hmm.
engage. You're going to just like see it and be like, uh-uh. But if you go into any situation with the perception of like, I belong, you're way more apt to put in the effort and have the like deeper feeling that like I'm entitled to my feelings, I'm entitled to sharing, I'm entitled to being a part of this, like, and show up
Mhm.
differently.
Yeah.
And I think in those situations where you see two friends getting close, part of this is also trying to recognize where your own thought process is stopping
Y
you from having a sense of belonging, where it has nothing to do with anyone but yourself.
yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that so much, like, where I belong, like, just thinking about that, and yeah, it might I just think, yeah, that is just I love that.
Yes, I know, me too.
I
It's been
just
like
think that's such a
so
powerful thing.
it is. It's so transformational. It's nuts. And like this works in every environment, right? Like
Yeah.
you walk into a new workplace and if you're like, "Oh my god, I don't belong here." They all know each other so well, it's going to suck. If you walk in and you're like, "I
Yes.
belong here and I'm going to have a deeper sense of belonging and I'm going to work on connecting with people." That's going to land so well. You just
Exactly.
trust that you belong or like create your own
Trust
belonging.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I love too that you said too, like at kind of at the beginning of the podcast, like in our like romantic relationships, like with our partners, we feel that we're able to be like vulnerable and share and be transparent. But then for some reason, when it comes to friendships, we don't. Like you're worried that if you say something or like exactly the example that you just gave, like you might still belong in that friendship with those two friends, but you might be worried if you say something or if you do share your feelings with them, it might be taken the wrong way. But it's also like that, it's not on you, right? Like for you, you are able to share your feelings and express what's going on for you and how people react and respond. Like that's on them. And,
Yeah.
I have that conversation a lot with clients. Like we can only control our own thoughts and behaviors. We can't
Mm,
control how other people react or behave. And although I think it's so like natural that we want to, like, or we might send a message and have a response in our mind that we hope someone responds like a certain way, or that, yeah, like that friend will write back and be like, oh my gosh, like I love her, but you're my OG. Like I would never,
right.
like you probably in some ways want to hear
Oh,
that because you are like,
yeah.
yeah, I introduced you guys, right? But it's like, no, kind of taking a step back and yeah, like you said, like where do I belong in this friendship? And that this person can be equally as best friends with someone else. That doesn't mean it takes away from like your friendship necessarily.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I do think that it's worth saying that even when we look at this from an attachment perspective, a lot of us have attachment wounding from growing up. And I
Yeah,
don't know if I know anyone who doesn't have some level of an experience from like grade school of having friends and then feeling left out or
yeah.
feeling like you don't belong anywhere or feeling bullied or not good enough. Like it is
Mhm.
so much of our conditioning that like we want to so deeply belong to something or someone or a group
Yeah.
and also have an underlying narrative that like we have to earn that or like that we're not good enough.
Yeah, exactly. I think, yeah, everybody, like, yeah, like I said, when I was talking to some of my coworkers earlier this week, like they all were sharing also experiences of like throughout your whole lifespan, basically, from when you're like, yeah, in elementary school, junior high. And I feel like, and maybe like, I don't know, I notice it probably more with girls, I would say. Like, of course, guys have different friendship dynamics as well. But I think
Sure.
with girls, there's so much of that being left out when you're younger. Like you can't sit with us. I
Mhm.
that happened to me. Like I literally, you're passing notes like back and forth in class, and you can see your name on a note that like two girls in front of you are right. Like that feeling, I
Yes.
feel like just for me at least instills like an anxiety attachment because I'm like, what is happening?
Yes.
Right.
And I
And
like
it's just something that I've had to work on.
yeah, and I love that you shared that because I think if I go backwards in time in my life to like the friendships I had growing up and like the attachment wounding, I actually don't have like any time I remember getting really close to a group of friends in general, it would feel so good for a while and then something would go wrong where I felt like
Yeah.
I was to blame or I did something wrong. And
Hmm.
that wasn't always true necessarily, but maybe it was like growing apart, maybe it was whatever. And like
Yeah.
I think that the hard thing is it makes you fearful of ever wanting to get really close to friends because you assume that they're going to leave you at some point or that you will do
Yeah.
something to ruin it. And so the same way that we see people who have like commitment issues in romantic relationships, I think we also see people who have commitment issues in friendships because it's a
A hundred
scary space.
Yeah, 100%. I remember shortly after this friendship breakup happened for me, that was kind of the most recent. I met up with one of my other girlfriends and I was talking to her and I was like, honestly, like, I feel like I just don't care if I have friends anymore. Like,
Yes.
I was coming from a place of hurt when I was saying, like, and this is like my childhood best friend and she's like so lovely and so understanding. And it wasn't like at all directed toward her, but like,
Yeah.
I think she knew. She's like, what do you mean? And I was like, I just don't care anymore. I'm not going to make an effort in friendships. I'm done. Like, I just feel like anytime I'm like close with someone, like if something happens or they blame me or I'm not putting enough effort or, like, so I was just like at a place where I was just like, I'm done. I'm not going to have any friends anymore. And that's just like, fine. I'll just cruise through life with no friends.
Yes.
Obviously that's like not realistic. And I do have some really lovely friends, but
Of course.
it kind of took me to a place where I was like really just blaming myself. I was like being so negative about the situation. And I was like, well, I don't know, maybe there's something wrong with me. Like I'm not a good friend or something. And it's hard.
Mm.
It's such a hard feeling to navigate.
It's seriously, it's so hard. And I think one of the things too is we really need to talk about not just today, but in general in our relationships, like the difference in expectations of what adult friendships look like versus teenage friendships, young adult friendships, like being childhood friends, like, because I think that it's really hard when we imagine being in like grade school, for instance, where you see your friends every single day at school and then you hang out a few times after, like a few
Yeah.
times a week after school or whatever. And you feel like you're texting all the time and you're doing all this stuff. And then I think that like I always remember this narrative of like if you had a boyfriend and you chose to hang out with your boyfriend instead of your friends, then you were a terrible friend.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, how dare you? Like, that's so gross. And like talking about that. And then getting
Hmm.
to a point in like probably like my late teens, early 20s where I was like, I don't feel bad about wanting to hang out with my boyfriend over my friends. Like, I'm going to do that though.
Right.
And then it becomes really normal, or I should say, it should become normalized in our, like, at
Yeah.
least in our mid 20s, dear God, that like you're going to spend time with your significant other as a priority in your life. That is
Yeah.
fair. That doesn't mean that you like ghost all your friends. Like, you still try to make effort with
Yeah.
your friends, but like, there's not like oh my God, you hung out with your husband 3 days this week and I can't even get one. Like, that kind of narrative should end.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Then, as you know, you add kids to the mix, and now your
Yeah.
priority is going to be your kids, and then your partner, and then your extended family, and then your friends, and your job. And it begins to feel like you are trying to create time where time does not exist.
Yeah. 100%. It's so hard. Yeah.
It's impossible. So, I guess I always own, and I think that maybe if I'm being honest, this is a bit of like a defense mechanism on my part, but I'll always say to people, like, I have friends that are low maintenance. I have friends that understand that I might talk to them
Yes.
for like once every 6 months and that I still have
Yeah.
deep love and admiration for them and that it's not personal. And that is true. The people in my life that have stuck with me are people that are unbelievably patient with my lack of availability.
Yes.
But I think I also have fear related to promising more than I can deliver.
Yeah.
And I think that if we actually just transparently spoke in friendship about what it is that we can offer, but what it means about us, we wouldn't have that same anxious attachment where it's like, am I doing enough? Am I showing up enough? Do you like me enough? Like,
Yes.
we just have to be on the same page about what it is that we have to offer and what that actually means for us personally when we're like reflecting back on those relationships.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too, like with that, and yeah, with having kids and things like that, and then like life gets busier as you get older, and like you said, it just like the friendship dynamics change. I'm very similar in you. Like I want to have like low maintenance friendships because I don't have the energy to like come home and like FaceTime when my daughter goes to bed about like what's going on. Like I want to show up and support my friends as much as I can, of course, like if they need me, but I also feel like I want my friends to know that like if they ever really needed me, then I would be there. Like that's the
Yes.
type of friendships that I want. And I think it's taken me a long time to realize in some ways that I don't always have to be like the friend that's like planning everything and doing everything because that's very much my personality. I'm always like a
Yeah.
people in my life joke, like kind of like a yes person. I'll always be like, yeah, 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 let's do it. Let's do it. Like, let's go for dinner. Let's go on this trip. Like, but then I'm like always feeling, burnt out in some ways about, so I've kind of taken a step back and I just, like my friendships and my friends in my life just need to realize like this is my capacity. And yeah, and I think just like you said, being transparent about that, like how much I can really give in a friendship. And that's hard because in that, yeah, you are maybe going to lose some friends because
Yes.
they are maybe at a different spot than you, or they still want you to text them every day. Like that's how they define a good friendship, right? Like we talk every day, we talk on the phone, but I don't know. It's a hard thing to navigate because I think as you get older, having valuable friendships that are on the same page as you really helps like add to your life instead of create like more stress and more anxiety. And yeah, it's just like it's tricky to navigate that part, especially if you have friends that are at different stages.
Oh yeah, and I think that like this is something that in dating we like do like courting of each other. Like, what do you have as
Yeah.
an expectation? Do you expect to see your partner all the time? Do you talk all the time? Are you a good texter? Are you not? But like, we don't
Hmm.
necessarily do that in friendship. Where we're like, what is your expectation of friendship? Like, what to
Right?
you is a good friend? Like, and like saying the things, and then we leave a lot of room for like assumptions again, or like
Yeah.
misconceptions of like what someone might be feeling or needing, and like just asking what they need. I think is huge. The other side of this, and I get this question a lot, is
Ooh.
how do you make new friends as an adult?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's hard.
Oh, the hardest. It's so hard. So I was thinking about this again in prepping for this topic, this
Yeah.
podcast, and kind of to the point that we just made. I think that when you've been friends with someone for a very long time, especially dating back to like grade school, let's say, you have such a foundation of relationship with that person that you know the depths of that friendship, and you can also say I'll talk to you once every 6 months and I love you, and that
Yeah.
person actually understands that because they
Hmm.
really know you and you really know them, and it's like the foundation's there. Making a new friendship in adulthood, I believe, is extra hard because aside
Yeah.
from where the fuck do you meet new people, is also I have limited time in comparison to where I did in other phases of my life to like deeply get to know and be in a healthy, loving relationship with someone and also have space later in time.
Yeah.
And so typically when people ask, how do I make friends as an adult? My first thoughts are, where do you spend most of your time?
Yeah.
And what would you do with free time if you happen to have any? So let's say hypothetically, I remember this one example. This was actually such a great example of my husband. My husband, um, about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, he's really into backcountry skiing, and he didn't really have a
Mm.
lot of friends that were into backcountry skiing and didn't have the equipment and stuff. So he really wanted to go, but he didn't know anyone to go with him. And so he is a little angel at meeting new people. I don't know what it is that he's drinking, but I'd like some of it. And he like found like an app that you can go on, and it's like matching with people that have similar interests to you.
Oh.
Yeah, so he like goes out and like says like I like backcountry skiing. I'm looking for people in the Calgary area that go backcountry skiing that would want to go. He ends up like meeting a few people. He met this like lovely couple, whatever, and they go out skiing all the time together.
Wow, that's a cool story.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, so we actually do have the right to put ourselves out there in a different way.
Yeah.
You can find people that have similar interests that are also probably seeking connecting with others that have similar interests.
Yeah.
And so in some ways it is an inorganic way of making friends,
Yeah.
quote unquote. But I mean, let's look at the way that people date nowadays. Is there a lot of organic ways of meeting people nowadays, or are we seeing a lot more like online dating platforms as the way people meet?
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's a lot of like has turned to online. I actually know of a girl that used but I think it's Bumble. Like
Yes.
that might be. And there's like a friendship component to that. And when she was telling me the story, I was like, okay, what? She's like, no, I made myself a profile to like make friends. And I was like,
Yeah.
"What? Sure.
Okay.
But
Apparently this
honestly,
is
she
a
ended up
thing.
meeting like 5 friends on Bumble, like in Calgary, and they
Oh my
actually
God.
like meet up and are like have developed like a friendship. And I'm like, that's wild. Like I had no idea something like that existed.
No, me either.
But it's kind of cool because yeah, she said that you can like go on and create a profile and then connect with people like similar to what your husband did, like that have kind of same interests or might be like moms or whatever that might be. And so you're looking for people that you can kind of share that time with.
Yeah.
And yeah, she connected with some friends and now they are friends. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, that is so interesting.
And I feel like maybe something that we should have prefaced earlier in this conversation is that you and I have something very similar in common, which is that we are married to people we've been dating since we were like prepubescent. Like
Yeah,
we
that
didn't
is so
really
true.
do like the normal dating thing either. Like how old were
No.
you when you started dating your now husband?
I was 16.
Yeah. I was
Yeah, what about
14.
you? Yeah, 14. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
So we
like
didn't have to do
we
that.
didn't do apps or any of
No.
the things. And so I always think it's funny because yeah, apparently some of the apps have like a I'm just looking for friends and you can do that. So I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in that, but apparently it works. There's an option
Apparently it
there.
works. I know I'm not going to be an expert in either, but I have heard it works. So it's an
Yes.
option. And I think for people that, yeah, might be like more isolated or are really searching for friends, I think there's ways out there to connect and find people that have similar interests.
Yeah, there's
Apparently,
got
an
to be.
app.
And I think the other thing is like, if you imagine organic ways of putting yourself out there, let's imagine that things that you choose to do for yourself, you put yourself in spaces with other people who are likely like minded and
Yeah.
potentially looking for the same things. So, like, let's say, for instance, like here at our office, Carrie Ann's starting a book club, and
Yeah.
it's all books related to like mental health or self development or like life transitions or all these things. So, let's imagine that you're like, I like reading and I like self development. I will
Yeah.
choose to do this despite not knowing anyone else because even if I go and I don't meet, a best friend, I'm going to feel a connection to other like-minded people in that space.
Exactly.
Maybe you meet other people, maybe you don't, but like realistically, the secret to making friends as an adult is not staying in your comfort zone.
Well, I couldn't agree more. Exactly. Putting yourself out there. Like, it's like, this is a funny example. Like, you see, even like a girl at the gym or something, and maybe you really like her outfit. It's like naturally
Yes.
you'd be like, oh, I'm not going to say anything because it feels uncomfortable. And, like that would be out of most people's comfort zone. But I think, like, imagine if you went up to that girl and you're like, hey, I love your outfit or I love the color of your outfit, and you kind of sparked a conversation. Like, she very well
Yeah,
could be like, oh, thanks. I like love the color of your hair. Like, who's your hairdresser or whatever, right? Like, you could definitely create like an organic conversation by even just putting yourself out there like a little bit. It doesn't even have to necessarily
totally.
be like an app or something, but just maybe complimenting someone or you never know, right? And I think a lot of people are like generally seeking friendship and connection. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
like the book club is amazing. Great way to meet people. They might not be your besties, like you said, but I think that's a great environment to just do something different and put yourself out there, which
Yeah.
I really need to do more of.
Oh, and me too. And I so own that. And I think like I
Same.
get the privilege now of owning a practice where I basically just get to bring people into our team that I want to be friends with and make my friends.
Yeah.
Like, in fairness, like I often think that we rely on our work environments to have us meet people, and that actually can be
Yes.
amazing. Some of my dearest friends are people I've met through work, like no doubt about it.
100%.
But you have to also be, I mean, two things. One, you get people who avoid making friendships at work because they don't just want to talk about work.
Yeah.
And so it's on you to also be like, I feel like you and I have a lot in common. Like, should we like go for dinner and be like out of work friends or like, like put yourself
Yeah.
out there a bit? And if you want to talk about things other than work, then talk about things other than work. And if it feels great,
Yeah.
awesome. If it doesn't, whatever. But like, I remember when I worked at the hospital, one of my like closest friends now, she literally said to me one day, like, I feel like we could be like actual friends. And I was like, me too. And I was like, should we like get a drink after work sometime? And like, it literally felt like being asked on a date. And I loved it. I was so
Right?
in awe of how ballsy she was for being like, I think we should hang out. And like,
Oh, cool.
oh my God, what a lesson for me to also be with talking to people and be like, I feel like we have a lot in common. Like, I really feel like we should spend some time getting to know each other.
Yeah. It's
Not a
so
major commitment. Just try.
exactly. Yeah. I think that is so good. And I think like also in our profession and probably for a lot of people, like the people that you work with and you see all the time are kind of like-minded. You know, for us, like our
Oh yeah.
profession, like what we do, we're all like passionate about helping others. And so yeah, it's a great opportunity to like meet people and have friendships. But like you said, I would just like always be aware of like creating boundaries at the beginning of that
Oh,
friendship. Like I don't want to talk about like work, you know, all of the time when we're not at work because then it kind of the relationship kind of in some ways can feel like draining, you know, like
yeah.
I want to just have like a friendship and then be at work, you know, like it like separated
Yeah.
a little bit. And I think a client and I were actually talking about that. Like if all of your whole life is like work and then your friends are work, it's hard to like separate it. So sometimes you do have to create those boundaries like at the very beginning. Like this is yeah, I want to be friends, but I really don't want to talk about work, right? Or whatever that might
Totally.
look like. But it's actually so funny. So I used to have this rule when I've now veered away from it, but I was very nervous about having work friendships because
Oh,
I was always aware of like if this friendship doesn't work out for whatever reason, we have to work together. So like then that's going to now affect my work environment, which I don't want drama or whatever in my work environment. So I had this thing too where like if my coworkers would add me on social media, I would decline it.
oh my gosh, yes. And I think that this is actually so common. I think a lot of people do this.
Yes, because I was like, but like what I'm posting on my like say like my own personal Instagram or whatever, like is like my life. And even if you're not like my friend, it's like why I don't necessarily need you to see like what I'm up to in my personal life. Like I don't
Yes,
know. I just felt like a weird thing about it. I've since kind of like loosened up on it a little bit, but yeah, I'm really like was in a place where I was like nervous to have like work friendships just because I've seen how those can go sideways. Like
yes,
I've seen it firsthand, like
for
at
sure.
work. And so I'm like, oh, I don't want to experience that, right?
Mhm. I think what's funny is I think it's a matter of also learning to like read the environment, read the room, figure out where you're safe, figure out where you're not. And like
Yeah.
um in this industry specifically, like I remember when I first started going into therapy versus like working in like the healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so scared of anyone knowing anything about my personal life because I didn't want people to think I was unprofessional or like judge me for what I did outside of work hours.
Yes.
And clearly that script flipped over, you know, a 4 or 5 year period to be like, you want to know what the fuck I'm doing behind closed doors? Here you go. Like, I'll lay it out for you. I have no problem with it.
I'll tell
And like,
you.
I'm like, I'll tell you, you want to know? Here's a video of it. Like, I'm so nonchalant about it, but it's also the industry that we're in. Like, we work in a
Yes.
humanistic industry where like connection is at the forefront of everything that we do, and people are attracted to authenticity. So, like, not being
Yes.
myself is not going to land. So, I'm going to just
Yeah.
be myself. But, like, if you're in like a very corporate environment, it's hard to want to let people in because you don't know how that's going to be used against you or like how people will perceive
Yes.
you. And so it is important to obviously like read the room of the environment that you're in,
Definitely.
which is so valid. But like, you know, again, obviously, not only are we in a different industry, this our clinic is a little different, our team's a little
Yes.
different, but like
Yeah.
I was like dying yesterday because there was like a trend going online about like post a picture of yourself when you were 21. And
Yes. Yeah.
there
Yeah.
was a my stories had Christy and then you. And like can I share this on here? Is that
Yes.
okay?
Of
Okay,
course.
I wanna make sure. So, Christy's story came up, and it was, like, a picture of her in a magazine with her twins. Like,
Yes.
Christy had a heart transplant at 14, now has 2 twins, and she's, like, 21, and, like, I was like, "Oh my god, hilarious," and then I go to yours, and it's, like, you at the bar, and you're, like, flipping the bird at the camera, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh my god, yes," like, that's so much more in alignment of, like, my pictures of being 21
You
too.
know, right? Getting a tattoo.
Just like fucking around. I was like at music festivals, like I don't even know where I'm
Yeah.
staying, like just the best. But like
Yes.
in my perception, it's like, yeah, if I go back in time to parts of my life where I was afraid to connect with people in a work environment, I would have been like so panicked, like, oh my God, what if someone saw a picture of me at the bar? Like, what would they think of me? And
Yeah.
that it's hard to find a place that you feel like you belong when you constantly feel like you are filtering parts of yourself to be favorable to the people that you spend your time with.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I've
Like,
definitely felt that. And honestly, even I could like go on about this, but like even becoming a mom, like
oh,
it's like I have to filter like I have to
can't
filter
imagine.
myself around like certain groups or like certain people in my life because like they parent one way or they don't agree with one thing and they're very opinionated about it and I'm like in this place where I'm like, I don't know where I can be like real or myself and like show up for who I am because I have to kind of navigate all these like different dynamics and that's hard because you want
Yes.
to just be yourself in all of your relationships and some of these people are also very close to me but they have kids and I don't agree necessarily with the way that they're doing things or they don't agree with the way
Mhm.
that I'm doing things and it's hard. It's so hard to navigate how you can be like genuine sometimes in some relationships.
Oh my gosh. So this just gave me like a light bulb of something that I wasn't even going to share, but now I'm like, yes. So,
Yes.
um, let's go backwards to when I got married. And my husband at our like around the time we were getting married and planning our wedding, my husband had this like incredibly tight group of friends and they were all friends, like such
Okay.
a group. And so he comes to me and he's like, "Hey, so I want my wedding party to be 10 people." I'm like, "Bro, that's excessive." But like, oh, I respect that. Like our friends are like our family. So,
Yeah.
okay. So the thing that was hard for me in that position was I have friends from so many pockets of my life that
Yes.
know me for different parts of me, all of which are authentic, all of which are real, but not necessarily parts that jive together well. So,
Yeah.
I have friends that I love to like be more like rowdy with, or friends that I love to travel with. I have friends
Yes.
that are like my like sentimental, deep, emotional, hard conversation friends.
Yes.
I have the friends that are like completely sober, never do anything kind of like outside of their comfort zone and are like more socially anxious. I have friends that could make a best friend with a tree, like
Yeah.
all over the place. And I relate to all of them as parts of myself.
Yes.
And so when I had to bring them all together, I recognized that I actually had a deep fear that all of them would think that I was not myself. That like I
Yes.
was lying to them either about parts of myself or that I was lying to the other people I was friends with about who I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're all true. It's just that
They,
like it's really hard to find people that emphasize and love all of the parts together.
Yes, 100%. I couldn't relate to that more. I'm very similar like you in that way. I have lots of like yeah, I have my friends from like even junior high and like high school that I like partied with and had like lots of fun with and then I have like yeah, friends now that are like in my work environment that are not like I wouldn't do those things with, but I'm like and then they see a picture or something they're like, "Oh my gosh, like you look so fun." And I'm like, "Oh, like I
Oh,
am fun. What do you mean?" But like,
sometimes.
they're just like, because they've never seen that side. They're like, oh, I didn't know you like drink or anything. Like, whatever, not, but it's just like, because they don't see that side of you. So it's like, yeah, it's so interesting. But those sides are all me, but it's like in different relationships, like you only show kind of like the one side, the side that's like most relevant to the friendship that kind of serves the friendship, I guess, in some way, right?
Totally. And like I think in some ways you can either take that information and say to yourself like, is there parts of myself that I'm not showing in my current friendships that I could be vulnerable enough to share and see if I can connect on a deeper level? Or
Yeah.
are there friendships in my life that are actually really healthy, but I just am lacking a friendship in one area of my life that allows me to self express in that area? And would I
Yeah.
feel more fulfilled if I just found a match in that area? I think that we have this like Disney cliche that we all have to have like a best friend, a single number one best friend. And
Yeah.
like, maybe the point is that we don't. Maybe the point is that we have a lot of best friends that hit really important parts of our personalities and
I
fulfill us
love
in those
that.
areas, and that's fine.
Yeah, I love that so much. I totally agree with you. We all were kind of like taught this, I don't know, idea that came, yeah, probably from like Disney princesses or something, that like you have to have like a best friend, your best friend in the entire world. But really, I totally agree with you. I think like I show up differently in my friendships and I have like different parts of myself that show up differently. And yeah, it doesn't mean I'm being like less genuine in some friendships or with like some family that might be a certain way. It's just
Yes.
that yeah, like that's just that side of me that they get, or like that's the side that I get of them, right? But
Yeah.
I love that. I think it could definitely show up like in all different ways. Maybe that's the point. Just have a whole bunch of different friends, and then you can, yeah, find your different parts in each of those friendships.
Yeah, totally. I love this. And I think
I
to
love it.
like I could talk about this topic for literally ever. I
Same,
could see
same.
us doing this again. I think that things that I really want people to know, we are very much in talks about how to invite this type of environment even into our own space. We are looking at
Yeah,
potentially doing just like less of like a group therapy environment and more of like a group connecting environment for people who feel like
yeah,
they're lacking connection and friendship and want
love
to
that.
find space that's safe for other people.
Yeah,
Um, we are always happy to do therapy sessions with people who are just like, this is coming up for me and I need help, and like working through that.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
common. I mean, people come to therapy
yeah,
all the time to be like, I'm freaking struggling in how to have a romantic relationship, and we don't question that. If you come in and be like,
yeah.
I am struggling to make friends, I'm so going to hear that and work with you on that. Like,
Yes,
not an issue.
100%. That is our gem. We
We
will
are
help
there.
you navigate it.
Yeah. We're like, yeah, me too. And as I said at the beginning, so Kelly's done school this week. Woohoo! And she's taking a much deserved little break because girlfriend needs some time for her family and her life and herself, and we want her to take care of herself. But she'll still be in our clinic. She'll be back on the calendar, I think, realistically in like 3-4ish weeks. So we're not far out from that, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And she'll be fully covered by benefits now. She will be charging her full fee, which she very much deserves, but she is available for clients as always.
Yes, yes.
And yeah, follow along to see kind of what group type things we do, what type of
Yeah,
environment Kelly also creates for this sort of work. And she is
yeah,
definitely accepting clients. So if anyone's interested in that, come
I
find
am.
her.
Yes, I am. I am. I would love to connect. And this was so great. Thank you so much for giving me the space to talk about this as well. I feel like it's something that I'm very passionate about. So
Oh,
thank
me
you.
too.
And thanks, yeah, for chatting today.
More to come. Okay, I am going to turn this off and thank you everyone, and we will be back with more episodes probably too soon. Okay. Bye. Okay, now it's going to turn off.